Hey everybody. So I've been wanting to build a Frostgrave table, and so I already have a lot of these dungeon tiles that I've been making, and they're kind of based on like a 4x4 inch grid system, and I like them a lot. They're great. So, but I was planning on doing a Frostgrave table, and those are like usually 2x2 to like 3x3, and I wanted to use my my tiles and then make them, make some bigger ones that I could like throw in with like terrain and things like that. So these work great as dungeon tiles, but I need something bigger. But I was kind of adding to my collection. I was building more of these guys, and I kind of had like a happy accident. I love these. These are my new favorite dungeon tiles that I've made. And if you've watched any of my my other videos about making dungeon tiles, what I do is I take a piece of MDF, and it's soaked up a lot of paint, because I paint on the MDF too. So like I prime minis on these guys, and then after they've soaked up enough paint, then I glue a piece of foam core to the top of it, and then I texture it. But I got this really cool looking, kind of cracked flagstone looking effect, and it was like totally by accident. But I love these. These are my new favorite style of tiles. So I'm planning on making a lot more of these that I can just sort of mix and match and throw in together to make like Frostgrave tables, or to use as like modular tiles when I'm playing D&D, which is great because I can just plop this down and be like, oh, okay, you guys are in this room now, and then move it over like that. But yeah, anyways, I'll get on with it. I'll show you how I painted these guys up, and it's pretty simple and easy to do, and I think they look pretty great. So we'll get on with it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out my little grids, and yeah, like I said before, these are based on a 4x4 inch system. So the smallest of my tiles is actually going to be 4x4 inches, but everything else scales up from there. Like these guys, or this specific one is 4 by 12 inches. And then I have 8-inch tiles and or 8x8 inch tiles, and so everything is gonna be on combinatorics of 4 inches. So whenever I'm making other pieces of terrain, it's gonna fit in with those as well. But I'm just gonna go ahead and measure out my grids, and then this little T-square thing that I have comes in super handy because it has a lip on the side, so I can just sort of plop it down on the side, and then it automatically gives me that nice right angle, and then it has all of the little inches marked out on it, and just makes this go way quicker. And I think I got it at Home Depot, and it was not cheap. It was not expensive. It was like maybe like $1 or something. So now that I've got all of my little grids laid out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a steel ruler, and I'm going to go ahead and cut into it with a carpet knife. And so the reason why I like this blade versus like an X-Acto blade is that you can snap off the little ends of them as soon as they get dull, and then you can kind of extend the blade a little bit further to cut through. I mean, it's a carpet knife, so it's meant for doing this, and you know, cut down and then towards yourself, but don't press too hard. If you're pressing hard, you're doing it wrong. You need to cut scores. So, you know, just barely put any pressure on it, and then just let it do the cutting. You know, let the blade do the cutting. Don't push into it, or you'll like slice down on your leg and cut open an artery or something. Just, you know, do it a few times, make a few passes, but you don't worry about cutting into it too far, because basically you're just marking out the grid before you put texture on it. But yeah, don't push hard. Like I told you, like be safe and be gentle and cut down and towards yourself. Be safe. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in with an X-Acto, and I'm gonna start cutting out shapes. So the reason why I didn't pull off the backing beforehand is partly because of this, because I want to peel off those squares one by one, and then I'm just gonna kind of organically go in, and then where the backing is not coming up, I'm gonna cut those into new little stone shapes. So it just happens very organically, because ripping the paper and then drawing in shapes based on how the paper rips, you just get some really kind of organic looking shapes. And if I have a whole piece that comes up, like a whole square that comes up by itself, then, you know, great, I'll just leave that one as like an unbroken kind of flagstone. And then the other ones, you know, I'm gonna, if they're more difficult to get up, then I'm gonna divide them up into smaller stones. But I really like the look of having some stones being broken and some stones being unbroken, because like I mentioned earlier that this is for Frostgrave, and Frostgrave, the setting is it's a ruined city. There's like some kind of arcane experiment that happened in the city. Some wizard was experimenting with something, the whole city was frozen, and then people don't go there anymore. That's how it got the name Frostgrave, the frozen cities, because, you know, adventurers go there and they don't come back sometimes. But the whole part of like getting rid of the paper backing, or like cleaning that up, you can get some really cool looking stone texture just by doing that, like by cutting into it with the X-Acto knife and like sort of like fixing the corners and stuff, and just like it gets you some like really cool looking stone texture. And it's like totally by accident, totally, you know, totally organic that it happens that way. And but so after I do this, when I seal it, I'm gonna, you know, seal in all that stone texture. And but yeah, I'm just gonna spend some time going around and breaking up those stones. And if a whole chunk comes up by itself and I get a clean break, then great. But if I have to spend some more time texturing it, it just adds to the effect. So after I've gone in and pulled off all the paper backing, how I like it, I'm gonna take a piece of sandpaper and I'm just gonna kind of run it over the tops of these pieces, and it's gonna get rid of any kind of burrs and edges, like hard edges that I don't want there, because I want these to look like worn stones. but it also adds a little bit of texture. Like the raw foam core, the extruded foam, has some texture to it. So when you break up the part that's smooth, it looks more like a porous kind of stone. And I was kind of picturing like slate. I was going for like kind of a slate kind of effect. But yeah, this is just gonna, you know, create a little bit more texture. Next up, to break up some of the stones, so I'm trying to leave some of the stones like flat and like, you know, they've been cut by a mason, and then I want some of them to be more cracked and weathered, just to kind of add to the natural stone effect. So I'm just gonna take a lava rock and I'm gonna go around, and I mean, you could take any kind of rock. This just has some good texture, or you could use like a tinfoil ball or something like that. But I do want to keep some like smooth stones that look nice and freshly cut, and then some that are just like broken and kind of destroyed and look like they're you know, cracked and returning to nature. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna seal everything, and I'm using a tube of Mod Podge and most of a tube of Payne's Gray paint. And Payne's Gray is it's not black. It's a dark gray, but it's a cool gray. So it has more of like a bluish, like kind of greenish tint to it, which is going to be good for making like kind of a slate type effect later. But I don't want it to be black because this is going to be like my mid-tone that I'm going to work from. So I'm going to add highlights, but I'm also going to add shadows like in the cracks and stuff. So this is going to just be a nice like general gray to work from. And the Mod Podge is gonna seal everything. It's gonna give it a nice like sort of primer layer to have something for the paint to stick to. So the first layer of paint is not gonna be paint. I'm using pan pastels, which are just basically pigments in a pan. And you could use like weathering pigments, or I mean, you could paint too, but these are all earth tones. So I have like a black, a kind of like a burnt sienna, and oh geez, what would you call that? Maybe like a dark ochre, kind of yellow ochre kind of paint. And or sorry, pigments. And so, but I'm trying to sort of focus the darker colors into the cracks, and then keep the lighter colors on the raised edges. But I'm just gonna kind of blend all those together. And so the pan pastels, you can find them at like an art supply store. But they're it's basically the same thing as weathering pigments. Like you could use either thing to do this. But they do kind of behave a little bit differently from a regular dry brush, because they like to settle in the cracks a little bit more. So, you know, they will stain paint, like they'll stain the Mod Podge, but also I'm gonna have to do something to seal them to the paint layer later, because they're very chalky, and they'll, you know, it'll come off on your fingers or whatever. But the great thing about them is that they look very, very natural as far as like earth tones and stone, and they are natural earth pigments. Like they're basically dug out of the ground and then that's, you know, that's where that pigment comes from. It's like the same kind of stuff that people made cave paintings from, like a millennia ago. So it's just, it has a very natural, earthy looking tone to it. Now I'm just going to come in and seal everything down with some dull coat. And finally, for the last layer of paint, I'm going to use some heavy body acrylics. So heavy body acrylics are just, they're basically very thick paint. So I'm using two colors here. I'm using unbleached titanium and more Payne's gray. So it's just adding those two together is just going to give me a really nice light gray kind of stone look. And unbleached titanium or titanium buff, or like if you're using like Citadel, I think that they used to call it Deneb stone or something like that, is basically the same color. But I think that the heavy body acrylics work better for dry brushing, just because they're pretty dried out. Like they aren't runny like something out of a tube, like, you know, Vallejo or like Army Painter or something like that. And then I'm just gonna very, very gently try and pick up those raised edges. But, you know, contrast is your friend. Like when you're looking at little dudes from 3 feet away, contrast is your friend. Like you want things to pop out, and you want all that texture to stand out. But this is just going to be that last little layer just to make all the texture pop out. You know, otherwise you might as well just be playing on a gaming like mat, you know, where you can roll it out and throw it down on the table and not do all the sculpting and stuff. You want to pick up all those details. But again, like titanium buff is where that's where they get the color bleached titanium or titanium white, which is like the most common color of white. And then unbleached titanium is basically how they get it out of the ground before they bleach it out. So it's a very natural kind of earthy tone. So yeah, there's a picture of the finished paint job. I really like these guys. I'm really happy with how they turned out. You'll probably be seeing them in my new mini painting videos for like the turnarounds, the money shots like these. Yeah, definitely my new favorite dungeon tiles. And I'm planning on making enough to make like a 2 foot by 2 foot board with like different kind of scatter stuff in between for like Frostgrave. But I mean, I'll definitely use them for like D&D and stuff like that too. But yeah, all I need is to convince one of my D&D friends to play Frostgrave with me. Because, you know, like Frostgrave, it's like D&D the skirmish game, like without any of the role playing. So I don't think it'll be too hard of a sell. But yeah, thanks for watching. Welcome all new subscribers, and take care of yourselves, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.